Hi, my name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Innovation Showcase. The main purpose of this ongoing series is to inform viewers about exciting innovations and creative individuals across the fields of business, science, technology, education, and the arts. Today via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guests Jim Victor and Marie Pelton. Based in Pennsylvania, Jim and Marie are a husband and wife team who have worked for more than 25 years as food sculptors, creating a wide range of artwork from butter, cheese, chocolate, and other food items. During the program, we'll find out why and how they become involved in this endeavor and how they go about designing and constructing their unique creations. Let's start by meeting Jim and Marie and then hearing all about their careers as highly accomplished food sculptors. Welcome. So delighted you're both able to be here.
Yeah.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, I was so glad I came across that recent article in the Boston Globe about you and your most recent appearance at this year's Biggie in Springfield. I'm eager to hear all about your food sculpting and have you inform viewers. But before we do, I think it would be of interest just to hear a little bit about your backgrounds and how this led to your careers in food sculpting. Jim, would you please start?
Sure. Yeah. What happened with me was that I had studied sculpture at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in the 60s and was doing that and, was trying to make my way in the art world and trying to get a career going of some kind anyway, related with the 3D arts. And there was a student I taught at Rosemont College, and there was a student I had who said that they wanted chocolate portrait busts. There was somebody who wanted to do this. It was Hillary's Ice Cream, I think. They wanted to promote these busts. They wanted to promote a show. It was a Broadway show called Sugar Babies. And Mickey Rooney and Ann Miller were the chief, people. And they wanted chocolate portrait busts of Mickey Rooney and Ann Miller. And that was my first food and art sculpture right there.
Terrific. And you were hooked ever since?
I've been hooked ever since. Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about it. It was one of those things where I did that, and then I saw there was all this interest in chocolate. I couldn't believe it, and it was like I got, there was a publication called Chocolate News, and they were promoting me at the time, and they were even pitching jobs to me that I couldn't possibly do. There was somebody wanted to do a chocolate car at the time, and I just thought they were nuts. I thought, a full-size chocolate car, like, how could you do this? Of course, now we've done a full-size chocolate car, so we know how to do this. But at that time, when you're just starting, it seems completely daunting, and but it's fascinating anyway.
No, it sounds like, I mean, both such a fulfilling career, but bringing so much joy to people who see your work. How can you not enjoy some of the sculptures that we're going to have the chance to see shortly? Marie, before we do that, enjoy hearing a little bit about your background and how you became involved.
Sure. Well, I came to sculpture a little bit later in life, in my 30s, and I was studying at the Academy, the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, and studying sculpture. And I had met Jim, and he was already doing the food sculpture. And I felt like it was, interesting seeing the pictures of the butter sculptures. And when he asked me to help him out on some jobs because they were just getting bigger and bigger, 800,000 pounds of butter for, one sculpture, and he had only 10 days to complete it, I was like, sure, I'll jump in there. And it was sort of right up my alley because I really do enjoy that kind of genre, that sort of, topic of doing animals, doing figures, and doing them together. And so with butter sculpture, that's usually what you'll find the topic of the sculpture will be some kind of like cow, farm animal, farmers, people interacting, with animals. So I do like that kind of subject matter. So yeah, and I guess, I was hooked ever since, as you had mentioned. And I think it's definitely because of the response that you get from people. It's they're always so excited to see it. And yeah, it just is a joy sometimes
Well,
to get that reaction.
most definitely, most definitely. Before we jump into some of your creations, we see one right here, the front page of your website. What are we enjoying in front of us now?
That is actually that is a Guinness World Record butter sculpture. I forget how many pounds. I think it's 2,400, something like that,
Yeah.
pounds of butter, and it's all French butter, by the way, too. It's President butter. We worked for President butter for a number of years doing sculptures for them, and this is the biggest one we ever did. And that was a real daunting one to do, you could imagine. It's composed of, there's 3 bases that have wheels on them, and they all come together to form this one
No, it's
sculpture.
4 bases actually.
4
So it's
bases,
4
okay.
separate bases that are 4 by 8.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing is 8 by 16. And, so then we had to be able to maneuver this big sculpture. So we had to make it in 4 parts with wheels on each base. And so we actually did it inside of a refrigerated truck that we rented, and a Penske truck, and we parked it in our driveway and, did the sculpture in there. And then when we delivered it to Times Square in New York, we were able to unload it, piece by piece. So each of the 4 different components, and, drop it down on the lift gate. And so, yeah, I would say that we did it by the skin of our teeth. It seemed like it was barely possible, to get it on and off of the truck. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible. I know this is taking it to the extreme on a grand scale, but would you share a little bit about the process you undergo with either this or even a more typical assignment, as far as getting an idea or being charged with a certain type of commission, and how you begin from the start? Do you do sketches? Talk it out? Do you each have different roles? How does that whole process work, please?
Yeah, well, it does start with the design, the idea first. And so the idea of doing, for this particular sculpture, a landscape, a cityscape of Paris, came from the brand President Butter, who is from France. And so it certainly was a challenge. And so the thing is that we wanted to incorporate certain landmark buildings, for the cityscape, but then, it can't be dimensionally, how do you do this? And so I think what we did with this one was we created a small maquette, a small model, so that we would be able to figure out exactly where things were going to go and how deep it was going to be, depth as far as the perspective, the dimensional perspective. And so that's how that went.
Yeah, and this one is different in the sense that there is no armature inside of this butter sculpture. This is 100% butter.
Wow.
Now, that's very unusual, and that's because it was a Guinness World Record, and Guinness requires to have it must be pure butter. It must be totally butter. When we transported it down from our studio, we did have a stick dowel down the center of the Eiffel Tower. But once we got there, we removed it. And so that made it possible to compete for the Guinness World Record. But mostly we have armatures in our sculptures. And as you'll see in some of the others, where it would be impossible to do them without some kind of structure inside of them.
Yeah, so thinking about the stability of the structure, is very important to us. And so usually there's no problem because we're designing these with armatures in it. This one did not have an armature in it, and we had to travel with it, you know, an hour and a half into New York City. And so we were, you know, it was very nerve-wracking, you know, because you don't want it to fall apart during the transportation.
Absolutely.
So that was a much different aspect of any compared to the other sculptures that we normally do on site, which don't have to be delivered, you know, but still have an armature in it to stabilize it.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, let's move on and hear about some of those other sites. Here we see you, Jim, working on an example here. What
Right.
are the craftsmanship involved right now that we're seeing?
Well, I'm doing a spinning wheel right there. This was done at the Big E last year, the Eastern States Exposition in Massachusetts. And yeah, I'm doing a spinning wheel because we were doing a sculpture about, I think it was Title IX and women's rights, or it was like women in the arts, I believe, and crafts. We were doing all kinds of things about arts and crafts. And so I was doing this spinning wheel. And of course, there is an armature inside of that. And you apply butter and very carefully model the butter as best you can over the armature. And as you could imagine, sometimes it's pretty tedious, some of this work, you know, because there's a lot of, you know, mechanical parts of it that you've got to do.
When you're on site like this, what's it like having visitors outside watching you as you go about your business?
Yeah, it's actually, you know, well, sometimes it can be distracting, but at this particular point, you know, we know how to focus on, you know, what it is that we're doing, so there's not too many distractions. But I think overall, it's really, you know, quite enjoyable having people look at you and then they have questions, and then we'll go out and we'll talk with people about what our process is. So compared to sometimes we're doing these butter sculptures and we do them with like for an unveiling. So we don't have an audience, you know, and when you don't have an audience, of course, you feel more kind of isolated in the booth, you know, it's more of a remote kind of a feeling. So when you are on display, basically inside of the booth and people are watching you, I think that it makes you, it's funner in a way. Makes you feel more a part of everybody else's experience with it. So there's a lot of ways of interacting with people.
Yeah, and also sometimes over the years, I've gotten, I think, somewhat a reputation. I've been there for 27 years, the Big E. And kids like me to wave to them when I see them. They smile and wave, and I wave back. And this has become kind of a tradition there. So I have to do that to some degree. But of course, I have to concentrate on what I'm doing too.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. Well, let's continue and actually maybe go back a bit and see some of your earlier ones and then bring us up to date. What are we enjoying in front of us now?
Yeah, that's the power of cheese car. That's Terry Labonte's NASCAR from, I think it was, what year was that, 2003 or something? It was pretty long ago. Yeah. I think it's like 3,600 pounds of cheese in that car. It's quite large. It's about 3/4 the size of an actual car.
Wow.
And it was done in Richmond, Virginia at a NASCAR event. And it was, the sponsor was Dairy Farmers of America, and the cheese was provided by Cabot Cheese. And so it was a great time. You know, I did it. Jim Scannell was a guy who was working with me at the time, and together we did this. It's how we made this is something that, you know, it took a while to figure out. But basically, there's a wooden armature underneath this entire thing. And we were given blocks of cheese that were basically like 700 pounds. And we cut them with a large steel wire into slabs. and we put the slabs onto the wooden armature. It was all very calculated, believe me, and then screwed on and then carved, and they were countersunk. The cheese pieces were countersunk, and the whole thing was carved, and then the holes were all filled in, and then the modeling all carved on top of everything.
Fantastic, fantastic. Let's move on. Marie, where was this done, commission of the Capitol?
That was actually done again in our driveway in the butter booth. And it was, when it was finished, it was driven down to Washington and for a event.
It was for Senator Leahy, Vermont, and also Senator Jeffords. They were the two Vermont senators, and Cabot wanted to honor them down there at the Senate office building. And so this was the presentation that we did.
And again, from 700 pounds of Cabot cheese.
Yeah.
And then it was the 700-pound block. You have to rearrange it sometimes, and so you can cut it into certain slabs, and then instead of it being a square, you wind up it with a rectangle, and then you can take another piece and put it on top, and then make that the Capitol, and then kind of carve it down from there. So basically that's going to be, that's a solid, with no armature underneath it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes with cheese carvings, like we've done portraits before out of blocks of cheese, and we have put a dowel down the middle of it, to kind of stabilize the thin part of the neck.
Because sometimes they can sag, when especially cheese starts to get warm, and it'll start to sag.
Definitely a challenge there. Well, we have some others we want to just hear a couple of words about. How did this polo player come about?
Yeah, this was for the Nebraska State Fair, and I think it was 2019. And
No,
it was right before the lockdown.
I'm sorry. You're right.
Yeah, so we traveled with our butter booth. We have two of them actually, which has windows on 3 sides. So again, people can watch us, while we're doing the actual sculpting. And so yeah, and polo was really quite a big event at the Nebraska State Fair, and we thought that would be a terrific, sculpture. And so we just designed the horse, the running horse, and with the player on top and with the mallet. And that was very enjoyable. I think 10 days it took us to do it.
And I want to add that Marie has a horse, so she's a horse person. So she really enjoys doing the horses. So
I do.
This was a dream job for her.
Terrific, terrific. Well, let's just show you the range of your work here with this most enjoyable one. A little bit about the York State Fair and what was involved here.
Yeah, this was York State Fair, and there was a sponsor of the fair that had a towing company that they towed these big trucks, and we just thought we would have a kind of a fun thing with the idea, and we have them towing a clown car, and the clowns are all in the cab with the driver. So it looks like mayhem is being encountered with this. So we had a lot of fun doing this. Yeah, we enjoy, just thinking up ideas and trying to just have fun with whatever we do.
Well, it definitely comes across that way. What was going here in front of the Met with Jack Black?
This was actually our first job after the lockdown. So it was early spring, or maybe March of 2021. And so they wanted, this was an app called Spoon, a new app, and they wanted to they wanted a Jack Black bust, and him doing with his guitar like from the School of Rock. And so they wanted a setting, wanted us to do it right out in front of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which basically is not possible because you really do need to keep it cold. So we did it at home for the most part. And then what we did was we put it in a crate and put dry ice in the crate, and then drove it up to New York City and basically just put it out on the sidewalk for a few hours. And it was about 65 degrees, I think, that day. So it was still pretty good for keeping the butter intact. But this is one of the rare occasions, actually, where people were able to see a butter sculpture without a piece of glass in front of them. Because usually we're inside of a booth and there's just this separation, between us and people that are viewing it. And here they can get like, a real view of what it is up close. Yeah, and there's just so much more to see, actually, I think, when you take away the glass. So it was a lot of fun. I think people were really interested in it. Yeah, but it was kind of a daring thing to do something on the sidewalk in front of the Met, because there's so many restrictions on what you can actually do without a license or a permit, but they got away with it. It wasn't us. It was the people that hired us that wanted us to do this. And so,
yeah,
but it's not great.
yeah.
And this is a wonderful one, commemorating 50 years of Title IX. How did this opportunity come about?
This was last year, 2022, at the New York State Fair. And so they came up with the idea, for honoring the Title IX and the female athletes, the program for encouraging the athletic program for women. And then they wanted to incorporate also chocolate milk, because chocolate milk is one of those really known as a recovery kind of a drink, for athletes. And so in order to make the chocolate milk stand out, then we added the chocolate cocoa powder to the butter. But it was really a lot of fun to do, and we loved doing the figures in action. And since there was 4 figures, I did 2, Jim did the other 2. And again, we had 10 days. We always take about 10 days to do the New York State Fair butter sculpture in the booth. But of course, it took a lot more preparation beforehand, because we had to make all the armatures brand new, so the balance beam, all the figures, the skiers, the bottle. So
nice. And here we see some women in action.
Right.
Yeah, right.
They have a rotating base, and so it's one of the only rotating bases, as far as we know, for butter sculpture. So it's fun, and so it works out really well doing this kind of a round thing.
That's fabulous. Well, we could hear much more about it, but we want to squeeze in a couple of others here. Where's this scene and what was it done for?
Yeah, this is the Big E, and this is actually last year. And this was the one where earlier there was a photograph of me doing the spinning wheel, and that's the spinning wheel there that I was doing. And this is to talk about women in the arts. And
or I think just the arts, I don't know. There's a boy in there, so
okay.
There's a little boy with harvesting the corn or looking at the corn, that kind of thing. But anyway, the other 2 figures are women.
Right. Yeah, and we had a lot of fun doing that. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff in there. But this is one of the more challenging ones. When we have 10 days, we don't have much extra time to do anything else,
Yeah. So each figure might take us, like a full-size adult figure, for instance, might take 2 or 3 days, probably 3 days. And then like a child might be 2 days, for one person to do. And so, you can count how many days are right there. With a tall figure, it's 3, and then 6, and then
you've got all the other stuff.
All the other stuff.
Yeah.
And that's just for one person to do. And then
there's a quilt in the background, and also in the front there's bushels of potatoes and corn, and we did all those potatoes and corn, and we did the baskets too. All that stuff is modeled.
Yeah. And then the standing figure is actually a rendition of Carolyn Brooks, who was the first butter sculptor in America. And she was lived in like 1870s in that time frame. And she had a wonderful career doing butter sculptures. And she was very, very good. And so she was asked to come to the Chicago World's Fair. I guess that was 1876. And then from there, she did butter sculptures, I think even in Paris, so she was invited to Europe. And she was a not little, but a farm wife, from, where is she from?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, the Midwest. I think she's from the Midwest. And she had a talent for doing sculpture, and
it's a most fitting commemoration, indeed. What happens to the butter after the show's over?
What we like to have happen, and it happens in many of the places, I can't say that it happens in all of them, but is to have the butter recycled. There are farmers who have anaerobic digesters, and you can really put anything in there that's organic, and it will decompose and form methane gas, and it makes energy. And that's what we normally like to do with it when we get done, is just recycle it in that way.
That's just about all that you can do with it, because you can't eat it. It's been handled too much. Sometimes on occasion we might tear it down and reuse it for another sculpture. But again, you don't want to use it too many times, because it could be contaminated, and then mold can start to happen. And then that's not such a good situation for us to be sculpting with a medium that has mold in it. So recycling is really the best thing. Also,
there's another factor here that goes into it. Often the butter we use when we're doing this is stuff that is not, they cannot sell it. It is not commercially viable, because it's been contaminated in some way. It may not be that there's nothing wrong with the product, but packaging, boxes get knocked over at the factory, and they can't sell this stuff, and they have to do something with it. So we get the largesse from that. That's our good butter that we get, because they can't do anything with it. Normally that would just go directly to the farmer and to his digester, but we get to use it first, and then it can go to, and it can be recycled again.
We only have a minute or so. Just in 30 seconds ago, just have to hear a quick word about this 50th anniversary of Hershey World and what you created, please.
Well, this was this past spring, and in February, in fact, and it was made for the Hershey's Chocolate World 50th anniversary in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And so this was a huge challenge for us. And we had Jim and I had many disagreements on how to go about, the basic build of it. But we decided, and it was different because we decided to cast a lot of the pieces, and then create a build, sort of with the different parts in the different colors. And so it was a huge, huge challenge. I mean, I really love the way that it wound up looking, but it was, yes, I love it actually when I look at it. And
definitely want to hear more, but unfortunately we have to stop for now. We've come to the end of our time. I want to thank you again, both of you, for taking the time to be here, for informing us about your work. So much fun, so enjoyable for us to see. It's great to know that you make the Biggie a regular stop, so people in our viewing area can look forward to seeing you in years to come. Continued success with future endeavors.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Also want to thank those of you for joining us today, and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.